If bedtime in your house feels less like resting and more like a battlefield, you are not alone. While we often think of ADHD as something that just affects school or homework, research shows it's actually a 24-hour disorder. In fact, studies reveal that up to 70% of children with ADHD suffer from a diagnosable sleep disorder, a huge jump from the 20 to 30% seen in neurotypical children. Today, we are diving deep into the science behind why the ADHD brain fights sleep and sharing evidence-based strategies to help your child finally get the rest they desperately need. First, and this is crucial, we have to stop seeing these sleep struggles as just bad behavior. There is a real biological reason for this. Research shows that up to 78% of people with ADHD have what is called a delayed sleep-wake cycle. Their internal clock is literally running late. The onset of melatonin, the hormone that makes us all feel sleepy, is delayed by about 45 minutes in children with ADHD compared to their peers. So when you're telling them it's bedtime, their brain genuinely doesn't agree. On top of that, we have the dopamine factor. ADHD involves the dysregulation of dopamine, a chemical that plays a huge role in regulating our sleep and wakefulness. When dopamine signaling is low, which is common in ADHD, the brain struggles to stay alert during the day. Then, at night, it fails to properly inhibit arousal and quiet down. Essentially, their brain's off switch is much harder to find and even harder to flip. It's not a choice, it's neurology. This creates a vicious bidirectional cycle. Poor sleep makes ADHD symptoms worse the next day, and then those more severe ADHD symptoms make it even harder to fall asleep the following night. It's a frustrating loop for everyone involved. And here's a common misconception. When a child with ADHD gets overtired, they don't always slow down and yawn. Instead, their brain goes into overdrive. They might become even more hyperactive, more impulsive, and more emotionally reactive as they try to fight off the sleepiness. Research confirms this, showing that lower sleep efficiency one night directly predicts higher ratings of inattention and emotional meltdowns the next day. Breaking this cycle is key. So how do we break this cycle? Let's talk solutions, starting with sensory regulation. Children with ADHD often have sensory modulation difficulties, meaning their brains can be overwhelmed or underwhelmed by sensory input like sounds, lights, and touch. This directly correlates with sleep problems. Think about it. If your nervous system is on high alert, how can you possibly relax? This is where tools like weighted blankets come in. Qualitative studies show that many children report the deep pressure from a weighted blanket makes them feel safe and calm, helping to regulate the anxiety and restlessness that keeps them awake. You can also try a sensory diet before bed, which might include things like a deep pressure massage, gentle rocking, or even some quiet stretching to lower their arousal levels and prepare their body for rest. Next, let's look at the timing of medication. Have you ever noticed a sudden, intense spike in ADHD symptoms late in the afternoon or evening? That chaotic period some parents call the witching hour? This could be what's known as medication rebound. It happens when stimulant medication wears off, causing a sudden return, and sometimes a worsening, of hyperactivity and impulsivity, which can completely derail bedtime. If this sounds familiar, it's definitely something to discuss with your doctor. It doesn't mean the medication is wrong, but the timing might need adjustment. Common strategies include adding a small, short-acting dose in the late afternoon to create a softer landing, or even switching to a different, longer-lasting delivery system. The goal is to avoid that abrupt cliff. Third, we have to rule out physical blockers. Sometimes the cause of sleep disruption is purely medical, and two common culprits are often missed in kids with ADHD. The first is restless leg syndrome, or RLS. This condition, which creates an irresistible urge to move the legs, affects up to a staggering 44% of children with ADHD. It's often linked to low iron stores, specifically low ferritin levels. The second is sleep apnea. If your child snores loudly, breathes through their mouth at night, or has pauses in their breathing, it could be obstructive sleep apnea. This condition fragments sleep and starves the brain of oxygen, and studies show that treating it can lead to significant improvements in ADHD symptoms. Screening for both RLS and sleep apnea should honestly be a standard part of every ADHD evaluation. Finally, we can use a technique called chronotherapy to help reset that delayed internal clock. This involves strategic use of light. You want to expose your child to bright light, preferably sunlight, immediately upon waking in the morning. This sends a strong signal to the brain that says, hey, it's time to be awake. Conversely, in the 2 to 3 hours before bed, you need to restrict light, especially the blue light from screens. This allows melatonin to rise naturally. Speaking of which, low doses of melatonin, given a few hours before the desired bedtime, have been shown in multiple studies to help advance the sleep cycle and improve total sleep time in children with ADHD. Long-term studies have also found it to be generally safe. However, it's essential that you always consult your pediatrician before starting any supplement to get the right dose and timing for your child. The most important takeaway from all of this is that sleep problems in ADHD are not just bad habits or a result of poor parenting. They are very often a core part of the neurobiology of the condition itself. By understanding the science, we can shift from frustration to problem solving. By addressing their sensory needs, checking for underlying medical issues like low iron, managing medication rebound, and using light to reset their internal clock, we can empower our kids to settle their racing minds and get the restorative sleep they need to thrive. Thanks for watching.